This cave existed for millions of years without ever needing protection. Not because it was safe, but because no one ever entered. Then humans created an access point and stepped inside. For the first time, this place needed protection from the very humans who had found it. Before it was discovered, Movile Cave was a place of absolute isolation. For millions of years, every form of life inside evolved around one assumption. That was never challenged. That no one would appear, no organism here was shaped to adapt to human breath. This was not a monument, not a protected site, not an object of study. No light entered, no air from the surface flowed in, no trace of the outside world. The stability of this ecosystem did not come from artificial safeguards. It existed for one reason only, an isolation that had never been broken. Then, in 1988, a geological survey team was sent out to locate a suitable site for a geothermal energy project. They were not searching for caves. They were not searching for ancient life. They created a prospecting shaft, a vertical shaft cut down from the surface. And in the process, it accidentally broke into the Movile Cave system that had existed there all along. A system that had never had a door. For the first time, a space that had been completely sealed was opened by humans. Not through exploration, not through intent, but through a technical action that seemed harmless. That door did not open into empty space. It opened into a system that had been operating in a way completely different from the world above ground. Movile Caves is not a large cave. The entire system is only about 200 meters long, formed in limestone, with several sections partially or completely flooded. But what makes this place unique has nothing to do with its size. It lies in the conditions inside. The air and water in the cave remain almost unchanged. The temperature stays stable at around 21 degrees Celsius. Humidity is nearly saturated. No seasons, no weather, no fluctuation. That stability is the foundation of the entire ecosystem. The cave's air is radically different from the atmosphere outside. Oxygen levels drop to roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of normal air. In contrast, carbon dioxide levels are tens of times higher. The air also contains methane, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia at concentrations toxic to humans. The water in the underground pools does not contain oxygen in any familiar way. Just a few centimeters below the surface, the water becomes completely anoxic. This is not an environment humans can survive in, but that is still not the most important point. Life in Movile Cave does not depend on sunlight. There is no photosynthesis. The entire food web is built on chemosynthesis, energy drawn from chemical reactions involving hydrogen sulfide, methane, and carbon dioxide. In other words, this entire ecosystem depends on an extremely narrow set of conditions. Change the air, change the temperature, change the microorganisms. Any one of those, and the balance begins to break. And that is why, almost immediately after access was created, Movile Cave could no longer be treated as a normal cave. Entry became tightly controlled. Each year, only a very small number of researchers are allowed inside, not because of secrecy, but because here, presence alone is already an impact. And from that moment on, science was forced to confront a question that could not be avoided. If an ecosystem can only exist in the absence of humans, is entering it in the name of research still the right thing to do? From the very first points of access, Movile Cave was not treated as a normal cave. Every entry was tightly restricted. Humans entered, observed, conducted research. Samples of water, air, microorganisms, and invertebrates were collected in a limited manner. Few people, short durations, equipment and clothing were cleaned to reduce the risk of introducing external elements into the system. And it was here that a problem began to emerge, not because humans were careless, not because they entered too often, but because even the rarest forms of access, carefully controlled and cautiously executed, were enough to introduce changes that could not be conclusively evaluated. Some signals were recorded, but no one could say with certainty whether they had existed before or whether they were the result of the research itself, because there was no baseline data from before 1918. Now, I marked it down to an intern, no reference point to distinguish what was original from what had already been influenced. At that point, the purpose of the research had to be reconsidered. Gaining further understanding now carried the risk of damaging the very system being studied up, not because the ecosystem had already collapsed, but because no one could be sure that it was still intact. As a result, access was reduced, not eliminated entirely, but restricted to the minimum possible level. Each year, only a very small number of researchers were allowed to enter. There was no major announcement, no sudden closure, only a quiet shift in approach. To continue studying this place, science had to begin by limiting itself. Movile Cave was not protected because humans had done too much. It was protected because even doing very little carried too much risk. Even when only a few people entered, even when time inside the caves was reduced to the absolute minimum, human still could not stay for long. Not because of the darkness, not because of the terrain, and not only because the ecosystem was fragile, but because the environment itself does not allow human presence to last. Those who entered the cave had to leave earlier than expected, not out of fear, but because the body began to respond. Breathing became heavy, concentration declined, time inside had to be measured in minutes, not hours. Movile Cave is not only a place where science was forced to stop, it is a place where humans cannot remain. And that is another kind of limit, not ethical, not optional, but physiological. A limit no equipment can fully bypass. So what is it about the air inside this cave that makes humans unable to breathe there? And why do the organisms that live here not need the very thing we depend on every second of our lives?